Hello again, it's another Agakala reaction. Today we're gonna have another talk that was, requested of me by Dr. Roy Casagranda, and it's and I'm sorry if I mispronounce the name now, Khalid ibn al-Walid, a profile of a warrior by Dr. Roy Casagranda. And because it's an hour and 24 minutes long, I'm going to do 20 minutes segments on it. Hopefully it's not too long and I'm not going to be stopping too much to actually talk about it, so the videos won't be too long. So let's just start and just learn something new.
All right, so the talk tonight is going to be about a specific person, which is unusual for Austin School lectures. Usually I do some like overwhelmingly large event that's unwieldy. In this case, the person is named Khalid ibn al-Walid. He was a 7th century Arab. He was actually born probably sometime around 592. So end of the 6th century, but most of his life was in the 7th century. And experiences taught me, and for those of you who've had me before, that I should never start my stories at the beginning. I need to start my stories way before the beginning. So that's what I'm going to do. And that's in part because I want to make sure that I ground him firmly in the period that he's in. Like I want to make sure that there's a good understanding of why what he does is so interesting, and also just sort of a sense of why it matters. I'm going to start also by making a completely subjective statement that when it gets on the Austin School YouTube channel will draw a bunch of ire, and I'll probably get a stream of nasty comments. But I like that. So, and it is this, that Khalid ibn al-Walid was one of the 3 greatest warriors of all time. And that's one of the reasons why I want to cover him, is because I just want to do a profile in a person who, if you're interested in warfare, it totally embodied warfare. So this is a talk about war. And I'll probably also get a little bit of flack for over-glorifying war, which is cool too. I'm okay with that as well. For the record, when I was at the University of Maryland University College, in their history department, we were trying to create a war history department. So this is part of my mental illness. So having said all this, I want to start by actually attacking the way history is taught in the United States. And the reason is because of the way we structure Western civilization courses. So if you take Western Civ 1 and Western Civ 2, the general idea, and most of the textbooks are set up this way, is that Western Civ 1 will cover everything till 1492 or 1648, whatever arbitrary year they picked to stop Western Civ 1. And then Western Civ 2 will be everything since 1648. So in other words, we're going to spend 16 weeks talking about the first 5,000 years of Western civilization.
Yeah,
and then we're going to spend 16 weeks talking about the last 350.
Yeah, he mentioned that in the previous talk as well about the, actually, I think both of the talks that I did reactions to, so, he's right, because it's like having exactly the same time to talk about something that happened during 5,000 years and something that happened during 300 years doesn't really ring like true or fair, isn't it?
Which is based on 2 really big flaws. The first is sort of a proximity bias. Because the last 350 years are closer to us, they therefore must be more important, which is definitely wrong. For example, the outcome of the Battle of Actium in 31 BC, I guarantee you, has way more impact on your day-to-day lives than the outcome of one of the British defeats, there were multiple, in Afghanistan in the 19th century. But the defeat in Afghanistan in the 19th century, was it in the last 200 years? The British have been beaten 4 times, 2 times in the 19th century. And so it's closer to you, but it has a much smaller impact than that event 2,000 years ago, the Battle of Actium. And so the first problem is this bias is wrong. The second problem with this bias is its racist implications. It is a profoundly racist bias because what it attempts to do is distill Western civilization into a history of how cool white people are, as opposed to actually looking at Western civilization for what it was, which was not a color-based endeavor. And if anything, it was founded by brown people. Mm-hmm. So then it's sort of an attempt by French, British, and English scholars to capture something that they didn't create, make it theirs, and then divorce it from its creators. And I can prove this to you, really simply, in fact. When you take that Western Civ 1 class, weeks 1 and 2 cover Mesopotamia and Egypt.
Okay. So just like I said, he did mention that before. I think he's gonna mention that in pretty much all of the talks that Western civilization classes are kind of really unfair in regards of taking 5,000 years and take exactly the same time to talk about past 300 years. So and I agree with him because it's true. Like there's so many things that happened during 5,000 years. Like there's a lot that happened during the last 300 years, but imagine that now and multiply that to make into 5,000 years. So yeah, and knowing America, they probably the last 300 years it's mostly taught about American history, isn't it? And all that. So yeah, okay. So this ad is kind of longer, so I'll see you soon. All right, I'm back after the ads, and we can go back into the Dr. Roy Casagrande.
In fact, your class is probably structured like this. Week 1 was Mesopotamia. Week 2 was Egypt. Every professor is different. Every university is different. But probably weeks 3, 4, 5, and 6 were Greece. And then maybe 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 were Rome. And then 15 was the medieval period, which is a 1,000-year span of time covered in 1 week. And then week 16, the first part of the modern. So if they went to 1648, they went to that, right, in that last week. The reason why this is rooted in a profound form of racism is because of the following. The class admits that Western civilization was created by Iraqis and Egyptians. It starts in Mesopotamia and Egypt. It admits that. And then it pretends that Western civilization got up and ran away and began inhabiting Italy and Germany and England and never again ended up in the Middle East, which is preposterous because all the Middle East could ever do as the founder of Western civilization is simply evolve its Western civilization. Do you see what I'm saying? It's not like it could lose it. It just evolved differently than Italy or Germany or England. But it doesn't make it any less Western Civ. And so the way we teach Western Civ 1, where we do 1 week, maybe 2 weeks on the medieval period, actually takes this to the next level. Because I'm going to talk about an event that takes place in that. We act as if the medieval period, which we call the Dark Ages, only took place in Europe. And in fact, we've renamed the birthplace of Western civilization the Middle East, as if it's in the East, when it's clearly not in the East since it birthed Western civilization, right? And then we ignore everything that was happening in the Middle East during the medieval period. And let me just give you an idea of what was happening in the Middle East during the medieval period. So while Europeans had no indoor plumbing and no paved roads, and their life expectancy was 40, and the way they took care of their waste was they would do it in a chamber pot and fling it into the street, the Middle East had indoor plumbing that brought fresh water in and took sewage water out. The Middle East had streets that were lit up at night with oil lamps. in part because I want to set the mood, show you the technology that was available at the time, and then tell you why what follows. It's the Battle of Karhai. I didn't actually, so I pulled up this map. I was having the hardest time finding a map. I was at the point where I was going to make a map, but I was running out of time. And then I thought, you know what, I got to find something. And I kept digging and digging and digging in the Googles. And I believe this is the man who made this map is Polish. If you're not Polish, I'm so sorry. I just guessed. But it's okay because most of the names are in either the Persian names or the Roman names.
That's not Polish names.
If I'm wrong, forgive me, but it's somewhere right in there. So what is today the southern end of Turkey, a little bit to the east, just north of Syria. The reason that battle took place is because of what a guy named Gaius Julius Caesar did. You guys incorrectly call him Julius Caesar. Caesar, I'm going to do it too, because it's fun. Who doesn't like to mispronounce things on purpose? Caesar decided his family was going bankrupt, that the best way that he could solve the bankruptcy was to start an illegal war with the Celts living in Gaul, conquer them, and then plunder their resources and enslave them. And so that's what he does. And he becomes fabulously wealthy and he saves his family from bankruptcy. He was part of a secret illegal arrangement with two other men. The three men were in the Senate. There were two patricians and a plebeian. The Senate always wanted a plebeian on board, and the plebeian, of course, was Pompey Magnus, the most famous plebeian to be in the Senate. And then Caesar, who was a patrician, and another guy named Crassus. Nobody ever remembers Crassus. Crassus and Pompey hated each other's guts, and there was a little bit of fear that maybe a civil war would break out. So to prevent the civil war, Crassus, Pompey, and Caesar got together and created this secret little power arrangement so that they could control the Senate, and then basically the three of them would rule Rome, and everybody would pretend somebody else was doing it. Isn't that cool? Crassus sees what Caesar does, sees how wealthy Caesar becomes, and goes, whoa, I want this. Crassus was the governor of Syria. So he thought, what's the nearest rich place I can go conquer? And he went, it's Persia, let me attack it. And so he took 40,000 Romans, and they marched from Syria into the Persian Empire, and they met at Karhai. 40,000 Romans. 32,000 infantry, and they were heavy infantry, right? Think of Roman legionaries with the interlocking shields and the spears called pilum, and they had a little gladius, a little short sword, and they would march in tight ranks, heavily armored. They were basically just a giant human wall, pointy human wall, because they had the spears sticking out. And then about 4,000 light cavalry and about 4,000 medium cavalry. And they went. And they meet the Persians at Karhai. They meet 8,000 Persians on horseback, 8,000 infantry, cavalry, and which is what they had. They had 8,000 cavalry. And the Persians that they met were light cavalry with bows and arrows. So the Romans are like, oh, we got this. 40,000 versus 8,000, what are they going to do, shoot arrows at us? So the Persians ride up, and they fire arrows from horseback. And the Romans were like, okay, testudo. Testudo is where you take the shields, they interlocked. You could connect them together. And so they locked them together this way, and then the row behind them held the shields up like this, and then the row behind them held their shields up so that they interlocked to make a roof and a wall, and the Persian arrows bounce harmlessly off the top. It probably sounded loud, but otherwise nobody's injured. And so at this point, the Romans are chuckling. They're like, what are you going to do? Just keep doing that? You'll run out of arrows eventually. And so then the Romans march forward slowly, and then the Persians turn around and fire another round of arrows at the Romans, and then they ride off. So now the Romans think, okay, well, let's chase them. So they go out of Testudo because you can't run like this. You can't run holding a fort in the air. You need to lower your shields. So they lower their shields and they take off on foot running. And they're chasing the 8,000 Persian horse archers. The Persian horse archers turn around in their saddles and fire backwards. Nobody had ever done that in battle. The Romans are shocked. They're so surprised by the thing, they don't have time to pull up Testudo, and hundreds of Romans go down. This rattles the Romans. They're like, whoa, we can't just chase these guys. Okay, we need to be a little more cautious. And the Persians start running up a hill. So now the Romans are slowly following after them. And the Persians turn around and shoot, but because the Romans are slowed down, they go back into Testudo, and not many are injured. They don't quite get into Testudo in time, so some of them do get injured. And so it slows the Romans down. They're getting a little nervous about all of this. But then the Persians go over the top of the hill. So now the Romans are like, well, we might as well run. They can't shoot through the hill. So they start running, and they run up the hill. And just as they're cresting the hill, to their shock and dismay, the Romans see 1,000 cataphracts. Cataphracts were fully armored soldiers on top of armored horses. The first time Europeans will do that, put a fully armored man on top of an armored horse, is 14 centuries later. At the end of medieval Europe. The Persians were technologically 14 centuries ahead of any European society in terms of heavy cavalry. 1,000 cataphracts.
That's a
was
20
far
minutes
superior
ahead
to
timer,
8,000 Roman cavalry.
But
Because they were tanks. There was almost nothing you could do to them. And they're charging up the hill as the Romans are charging down the hill. So the Romans charging down the hill are trying to stop, and they're shouting to the guys behind them, hey, stop running. But the guys behind them can't really hear them.
or see anything ahead.
Some of them are on the other side of the hill, but in part because of all the noise. And the guys running down the hill can't stop running, because if they do, they'll get knocked down and trampled to death. And so they're forced to run towards these cavalry units. They can't get into formation, and the cataphracts cut through them like a hot knife through butter. It's a catastrophe. Romans are dying everywhere. The cataphracts get to the top of the hill, they turn around and come back through. They get to the bottom of the hill, they turn around and come back through. The Romans are doing everything they can to try to create order and get back into combat formation, and they can't do it. Eventually, Crassus's son, who is up on the hill, gets identified by one of the Persian warriors. They kill him, cut off his head, stick it on a spike, and jam it into the ground so that his dad can see his head. The Romans are completely disheartened. Crassus comes up with a new strategy, because while the cataphracts are going up and down the hill, the horse archers return, and they're just shooting arrows at the Romans who can't get into formation, let alone go into Testudo. And so the Romans are getting hammered by arrows and cut to pieces by these heavy cavalry men. And so he decides, you know what we'll do? We'll just fight this until the Persians run out of arrows.
Are you a business owner looking?
Okay, that was unexpected. And I think I might just finish here. And after this ad break and stuff like that, I'm just gonna keep going with another episode and part. So far it's really good. The thing about that armored, I don't know why, but as a Polish person, our armored cavalry brings to mind hussars, as we actually say. I spent too much time in learning about history in English. And yeah, but that was like a really long time later. So far it's interesting, but it's stuff that basically I kind of heard a bit as well in his previous talks as well. So yes, thank you very much for watching. I see you tomorrow, and you see another part of Dr. Roy Casagranda's talk in 2 weeks time. So thank you for watching. Bye.